You're listening to Resilience Rising, the podcast that shatters poverty myths, sparks optimism, and fuels innovative change through community-inspired discussions. The title of today's episode is Community Collaboration. Everyone is in, so no one is out. I'm Amanda Fellows, Community Programs Manager at CFS Counseling and Wellbeing.
And I'm Brian Shelley, the Chief Executive and Philanthropy Officer at United Way Simcoe Muskoka. Today we're talking to two folks who work for organizations that champion collaboration. One heads up a very new grassroots nonprofit whose members first came together on Facebook to create a safe and supportive community at the onset of the pandemic. The other works at a registered charity that's been around for decades that is focused on strengthening communities through collective impact and shared capacity. Together, we'll be discussing how collaborative approaches to poverty reduction can empower those experiencing hardship and make long-lasting difference in our communities. So Rebecca, Nikki, welcome. To start off, maybe you could each introduce yourself, let us know what you do, where you are, who you're speaking on behalf of, and why you've joined us today. We'll start here with Nikki.
Sure. My name is Nikki Glenn, and I am the founder and executive director of Barrie Families Unite. As you alluded to, Brian, we came up out of the beginnings of COVID as very much just a grassroots safe space for people to organically reach out for help when we were navigating those crazy waters that were those first few months of COVID. And we just kept evolving. It was a daily evolution for a while, and here we are. Four and a bit years later, and we've registered ourselves as a not-for-profit, and our focus is on ensuring that everyone has dignified access to essential needs, which we've identified as being grocery gap assistance, helping people between food bank orders, clothing year-round seasonal access to clothing, and house start-over kits, so linens and kitchenwares when people are facing those different reasons where they are kind of starting from scratch all over again.
And in my intro, I called you Barrie Families United is relatively new, but you're now 4 years in. This is no longer relatively new. This is now, you're foundational to our community.
Oh, well, thank you. I still think that classifies this as fairly new. You look at some of these other organizations who've been around decades, and we definitely felt like we were thrown into the fire in some aspects, but that was the place and time that we came to be, so that just was the nature of, in real estate, it's location, and I guess in building an agency, it's timing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, fair.
And Rebecca, who is my colleague from United Way Simcoe Muskoka, maybe you could share what you do and why you've joined us today.
For sure. Thanks so much. So my name's Rebecca Vaughn. I am with United Way Simcoe Muskoka, and I have the great honor to work with lots of agencies in community with collaboration and partnership. A lot of my history is around bringing folks together, my career history. Some of the great things that I've had the pleasure of doing are working with 211 and Community Connection, and in doing that, really honing in on the social determinants of health and how that affects the community's well-being.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And we're so excited to have you both here today. And I love this topic. This is our last episode, which is really exciting. And I love the topic of collaboration. So maybe both of you could speak to, why collaboration or collaborative efforts and community-led initiatives like Barrie Families Unite are critical to, addressing some of the multifaceted issues around poverty.
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we're still learning and we'll still continue to learn is that working with a group of organizations or bringing a group of organizations together allows us to really hear a voice of a community that would like to be served. I think it gives us very unique positioning to identify the challenges that are really happening and to bring to play to the organization's strengths. It really allows folks to, through a project or through an organization's collaboration, sometimes we see stronger some contributions earlier, stronger. It allows for longevity. It builds sustainability over a long term, and we really get to identify that when we work together.
Yeah. That's great. I think I've appreciated United Way's commitment to looking at collaboration as a key component to funding opportunities, because I think it can be really easy in the social service sector to silo yourself. You're very fixed on your own scope and your own mission, because all the work is important. But I agree that when you collaborate, you create sustainability, even sometimes when the dollars aren't there, right?
Yeah. No, I'm very excited to be here for this topic because we talk about collaboration all the time at BFU. If we didn't truly see a need for us to exist, we would fold up shop and go away. But the reality is that through our evolution, we've seen those gaps, and what we've been able to do is, when we approach a different area of essential need, is find the agencies that are working in that, find those gaps, and work together with them to make the whole offering stronger to the clients, right? So whatever that might be, if it's access to getting the service, that is a gap. How can we help? If it's gapping certain demographics of a client from an agency that it's just not quite enough service that they're getting from them because their needs are a little higher, then can we fill that gap, for a few days or a few weeks? I'm talking about food in this instance. But we strongly believe in collaboration. We say collaboration over competition wins every single time, and always looking for ways to further collaborate and find other community collaborative partnerships. And we're embarking on a couple new ones right now that are exciting. We're going to see how those unfold. So, I think it's a very important element to the work that we do in agencies, both non-for-profits and charities. And
Barrie Families Unite, I think, is a stellar example of a community-led initiative that really came together to address all of the cracks we have in the current system in terms of meeting people's basic needs. It's a powerhouse community, which I think is really cool. I mean, certainly we go to you for so many things, so many, we were just there last week looking for a rice cooker for a client who's a new Canadian who, really needed access to that appliance. Is critical to their integration. And I think Nora had it in 3 minutes. So I think, Barrie Families United is you do really good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Good. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if you could, with all of the different connections that you have in the community, if each of you could maybe shine the light on a successful example of a community-led initiative, maybe not outside of your own organizations, that has led to making a tangible impact on alleviating poverty for folks in our community.
I think I am going to speak sort of inside of our organization a little, but it's not really us. We got to partner, we got to lift folks up, but I think Redwood Park Communities, the Furniture Bank is such an incredible example of they really used personal experience to build a program and an organization that moves mountains. They recognized so many things in doing that, so many challenges. They even as person-centered as it is, they even looked at waste diversion. They did a great job they continue to do a fantastic job of really recognizing how furniture for someone can create a home. And so that person-centered piece is so valuable. In my mind, that's kind of everything. I think that's what, everyone comes with unique needs, but also gathering community together to really reinforce that it takes a village. Mm-hmm. I really love that.
Yeah, and that was a cool example because it brought together not only Redwood Park as the lead, receiving the funding through United Way Simcoe Muskoka, but also it partnered with the Toronto Furniture Bank to develop best practices. It partnered with a for-profit partner with Jeff's Junk to help with the transportation of furniture. It was, you're right. It's a really cool example of in that case, even cross-sector collaboration at the end of the day to help people stay housed, because we know that as soon as just because someone has that home, it doesn't mean they stay housed, right? You can only live on a cot, sleep on a cot, and eat dinner off of a cardboard box for so many days before you think maybe where you were before is probably worth going back to.
Yeah, They talk a lot about families and the impact on children and the stability that it adds. it's all well and good, housing being such a huge topic for all of us these days, but they talk about how, someone may find a place to live, but if they don't have a bed, if they don't have the appliances they need to make it their home, then that's where the resilience comes from, right?
Yeah,
that's when the person is then empowered to keep doing things and probably will give back in their community as well.
Yeah. And I think we undervalue that piece a lot, like that need, even, we're talking about appliances or, a rice cooker, if that's what it takes for somebody to feel like they're at home, right? And especially when we're thinking about newcomers or new Canadians, that social integration piece, it's so important, but we really don't value some of those pieces. We minimize it.
Well, and it goes back to also, in our previous episode, we were discussing food security, and we, as a sector, but also I think as a society, we tend to segment these things, right? If you think like, okay, you address housing. Okay, we've addressed housing, there's no longer a problem. Well, there's still other issues, right? So it's poverty, right? Whether we're going to say that it's housing or it's food or it's furnishing that home so that you have a place to safely eat that food. It's about poverty, and so I think that it's a really great example of an initiative that I think at first people don't understand how critical the furniture is to creating that home to sustain someone living in it if they're experiencing poverty or living in a low-income household.
Yeah, and I think what Redwood does, and we collaborate with them as well, because we kind of, again, we don't aspire to duplicate things that are already in place, and furniture is a big endeavor physically and space-wise and everything, right? So we do a lot of referrals. We can do everything up to and including like countertop appliances in the kitchen, but once it gets into furniture. And I think what they do with the furniture and what we do with the essential needs, and you guys were all alluding to, I think is what we feel we provide is that baseline, ease of mind to know that you've got those essential things covered. Because as you just alluded to, Brian, there's often a lot of factors involved in poverty. And so there's a lot of things people are working on themselves, whether it's health, mental health, physical health, etc. So if you can take a big thing off their plates and off, the space in your head and allow them that space to work on other things so that they can hopefully, get out of the cycle that they're in. I think that's just providing that base level step up to giving them that room to hopefully be successful in their transition up. So,
yeah. Nikki, is there an initiative that you want to shine a light on that has really struck you as being collaborative and having a huge impact?
I'll talk to one that we've been involved with together with Ryan's Hope, and that's our Loads of Love laundry program.
I love that. I love the Loads of Love.
Yeah. And that was started simply by Ryan's Hope founder, Christine. She saw the need. I think she wanted just some collaborative partnerships for sharing the cost and the volunteer load. And she thought, their demographic is more of the unsheltered population. Ours is a little more around the low-income families and households that are housed. But, anyways, the demographic we serve. So, so it was a very quick yes from us, and it just allows those people, again, who are struggling with deciding, which way to go. Do I spend that money on snacks for my kids to take to school, or do I send my kids to school with clean clothes? So we want you to be able to do both, right? So that was a very successful program we've been running for the last year and a bit, and that even brought in actually some commercial businesses as well, in terms of the couple laundromats that we've been using have been very supportive. Some have made financial donations towards the program because they believe in what we're doing. So,
yeah, and that cross-sectoral piece is critical too, right? Because in the social service sector, we're all competing essentially. I know you said collaboration over competition, but there's only so many pots of money that everybody can dip into, right? And so when you can partner with businesses to help create opportunity, I think that's a piece we need to do more and more and more of. I'm not quite sure how you do that, but I think we need to do more of it because it is the way.
Yeah, and your comment about competing, I think also we need to start giving some of that up. And I think it takes leadership from boards of directors through to senior and mid-management of organizations also to understand when it's time to step back and let another agency take the lead. And, Nikki, you gave a really good example around that, around furniture, right? You identified early on, like, we don't have the space, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the delivering service. There's another agency that's starting to do this. We're going to back up, and in fact, our job will be to refer, right? And I think that there's, if we look at it, there's not enough money, and I think we probably can all agree that there's, whether or not there's enough money in the society in general, there's not enough money pooled in the charitable sector or not-for-profit sector. Yeah. So if that's the case, how do we stand back? How do we let others take the lead? And how do we sometimes collaborate from a supportive role? Because at the end of the day, we were all focused on helping the same vulnerable folks. Yeah. And this whole turfism piece, which, I love both of these examples. It's about giving up turfism and understanding, we used to talk in the sector, but like, well, that person is a client of X agency. No one is a client of any agency. Yeah. They're all members of our community, and all of our agencies are playing our different parts to lean in and lift those people up. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that leads into, some of the next question around how collaborative approaches to poverty foster a sense of empowerment and resilience among those experiencing hardships, right? A part of it is about how do we keep the client at the center of that, so that we give up some of that turfism and that we, collaborate better with the client experience in mind, right? So do you see that in the work that you do?
If you don't mind, I'll start. As you were talking, the first example that came to mind was our work we do with food insecurity and the Barrie Food Bank. We have an amazing food bank in our community, and they service so many households. And they, in some instances, they clients have various ways that they receive information, true or not true, about what agencies do and don't do. Right. And so sometimes I think even us becoming more, like sharing the communication, so we really do understand so when a client says to us, oh, I can't do that because that's not the way the food bank works, we can say, actually, this is, they've made a pivot in the last month, or now you can self-shop at the food bank, or I can't get there because of X, Y, Z. Well, let me see, having those really strong relationships with other agency members, I think just helps smooth the path for clients because we know each other's scopes and how we can fill in. So in the case of the food bank, one of the roles that we have stepped into play is helping people get their food bank orders. They do have some delivery availability, but it's limited by their volunteer base, and so we're able to, especially in those first time setup situations for clients, say we can get that first one to you, and now you've got 30 days to figure out how you're going to get there next month, but we can do an agency pickup on the Wednesday for you and get it delivered to you, right? So just finding those little spots where you can see an ability to jump in and just make that experience a little less onerous for the client.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And we are in the business of people, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to, there's this sort of fine line between having folks retell their story too many times and remaining client-centered, right? Mm-hmm. So I think when we have the right entry, the right door for a person, they're able to share their story, and then we can bring folks together to move their goals. Yeah. And I think there's something about that is unique and special and kind of maybe better than it has been before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I've been super pleased to see the volume of agencies that are starting to use our services, because they've already got all that information on the client. Yeah. We don't need to do another vet or question dive or anything. If these agencies are coming to us asking us for X, Y, Z of the things that we do help with, we know you've done that, so here you go. Like, it's a very easy, smooth process that we can take that part off of these agencies' hands. They don't have to worry about their clients at night as they're wondering where they're going to get those steel-toe boots or whatever for.
There was, in a previous podcast, Chris Peacock from the Sharing Place and really used the term dignity over data.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We need to start treating people with dignity. Yeah. And, to your point, how many times do you want to tell your story over and over again before you actually decide, I'm done?
Yeah.
And it's not worth it. I can't go through the trauma of telling my story a 12th time this week to a different agency.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard sometimes in the social service sector because we are required to get so much information, or required to put certain information here. A lot of times that's based on our funders, right? So certain funders expect a certain level of information or certain documentation that we can't get away from. I think we need to do that more. Like, that integrated service piece is important to the client experience, especially recognizing that the onus is also on us as service providers to create safety within the houses or spaces of other service providers, right? Because people may start off at Barrie Families Unite, and that is their safe place. They know they can go there, they get those needs met, but they really need mental health support, but they don't want to come to CFS, right? And it takes a lot of energy to build a bridge to create safety in other spaces for clients. And so in that process, that integrated service model is more important than ever. I'm glad we do those things in certain places, but it is hard because there's a lot of expectation, right, from funders and things like that.
Community Connections and Collingwood is doing a lot of really good work around building a network, and it's still in its beginning stages. But how wonderful would that be if something for us to strive to across Simcoe Muskoka would be an individual, we're not going to use the term client, we'll use the term individual, or a human being walks into an agency and says, hey, my name's Brian Shelley, and here's my address, or here's my social insurance number, or here's my whatever identifying. And, you can go into a database and like, okay, Brian, I see your story. How can I help you? As opposed to going through, the barrage of questions and interrogation before we determine that the person is worthy of help.
I think the housing sector has gotten some of that right with HIFIS. Don't ask me what that stands for. I know I'm not supposed to use jargon, but I actually don't know what it stands. Housing information something. But the places like Busby and Salvation Army and the library, actually, they all use a shared database, which I think is really helpful, because then if a client walks into the library, they know they've already connected to Busby, or they've already connected wherever across that specific sector. The reality is that many of those clients are using many facets of the sector, and what we don't have is this umbrella. Like, we just don't have that yet, right? So it's cool to hear that 211 is doing some of that work.
And I think, too, organizations maybe like ours need to think about why we're asking. So when we're collecting data or when we're asking for reporting, we need to think about what does the sector think is reasonable? Yeah. And also, why are we asking these questions? If we're collecting data that we're not using, then why? What is the purpose of that? And how is that helpful to the organization or even to the client, right?
Yeah.
So thinking of it in that way those are absolutely conversations we're having. Yeah. And I venture to say that we already have made changes and will continue to do that. We need to really hear what our sector is telling us.
Yeah. Well, and that leads really well into my next question. What role do local governments, funders, and grassroots organizations play in fostering a collaborative environment to tackle poverty at a community level?
So I think some of the work that we're doing is around capacity building. We want to hear what the communities believe they would like support with and help get them to the places, like organizations, grassroots, for instance. Are they looking for partners who they can then receive funding through? What does that look like from a capacity building standpoint? And even as much as organizations who are building, like what organizations did they need to be connected to? What other folks do they need to get connected to move their purpose? Yeah. And I think that's absolutely the work we're finally getting to do, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I think some of these initiatives that we've all been in attendance at, the one that the Y has been focused on, bringing people together. The catch-22 is we're all probably don't have enough time or resources as it is. So those things are lovely to do, and I do think we do need to do more of them, because I do think that's where the big ideas can come to, right? Like, I think you're right. I think we almost need to just whiteboard. If we had a blank slate, how would we organize this, right? How would we do this? Would it look the way it looks now, or would we do it different? And if the answer is it would look different, let's work towards that different. Like, how do we get from here to there?
And I think that's where we go back to giving up on turfism, right? And getting away from, I mean, even we talk about a client focus, like get away from a client focus, get to a person focus.
Right.
How do we focus on the person? How do we focus on the people? And I think through collaboration, we get closer to actually solving the issue for the person as opposed to fulfilling our own mission. Sometimes we get so tied to our mission as an organization without understanding what we're actually trying to achieve. And sometimes mission can get in the way of doing good.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I remember when the Housing First model first came to Simcoe County, there was the woman who was successful in Alberta. It's that little town in Alberta where she was implementing a Housing First model out there. She came to Simcoe County to a forum at the county building and to talk about the Housing First model and how you implement it. And so I went to this meeting, and the first thing she said was, you have to forget everything you've ever done and burn it all down. And you can feel the anxiety in the space, right? You have all these service providers who are serving their own mission, who have been and doing really great work. And somebody says to you, well, just forget everything you've always done. Forget all the work you've done. If you want to do this right, burn it down. And, it's a hard pill to swallow, right? When you feel like you've been doing all of these great things in the community, but I think it is how we do it, right?
Well,
you have to.
I mean, if I want to be, cynical is not the right word, but really push this, right? We often hear folks say, and I'm sure we hear it all in all of our own shops, like, we don't do it that way.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we shouldn't do it. Because if the way that we've been doing it worked, then we wouldn't actually exist anymore. We would have solved poverty in our community. We would have solved housing in our community. So to me, I think that this is where donors and funders and leaders and employees and volunteers we have to let go of this term of that's not the way that we do it. Because clearly the way that we do it, the way that we've done things, isn't good enough.
Yeah. And I think collaboration is one way that we start to move the needle, right?
Yeah.
If you had advice for organizations, for people who are looking to collaborate, Rebecca, you supported many organizations who collaborate. Nikki, it's what makes your world go round at BFU. What advice would you give people around who are just new to collaborative work and wanting to start that?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think, honestly, this is my humble perspective, but build a relationship. Don't just jump into a project. Don't just jump into the next thing.
Look at it like dating. Right? There's a courtship period before you move in together.
Build relationships. Spend time to get to know the organization. We talk about, mission and vision. How well do those things align? Or how can we get to a place where those things align? Are we reducing duplication? So are we, you're going to do the thing you're amazing at, and we're going to do the thing we're amazing at. And together, we can probably move mountains. So, for me, build relationships.
I like it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's important. Like, you need to work with agencies and people you feel have similar values and levels of integrity that you're bringing to the table, and that that if you're going to work together, they're taking your charity's name, your not-for-profit's name into their hands as well, right? Because that reflects on you. So I think that's important, but I also think that is the time to, whiteboard ideas and, maybe on a more microscopic level, burn the stuff down and go, hey, like, if we're going to be collaborative, what could that mean? And what might that have to change? And maybe I have to go to my board and say, hey, you know what? Or do some pilot projects. It doesn't have to be, nothing has to be built with brick and mortar. You can pilot some things out and see how they feel, and then, tweak and move on. So it's a great opportunity. So I would encourage anybody who's thinking of it to dive in. If it doesn't make you scared, you're not doing it right.
And I know I'm not supposed to answer my own question, but also I would say don't quit, because sometimes collaborative work is hard.
Fair. Sure.
And there's a lot of
Like
bumps.
a relationship.
Like a relationship. This is a great analogy for this.
This will be my next podcast, is relationship advice.
Please do that. I would listen. But sometimes there's a lot of bumps to collaboration when you're merging missions and you're, forging a path together, and it's really easy to quit when it's hard. So don't quit.
So normally at this stage, I ask we have one or two guests usually, to share, their one takeaway. And I'm going to take that off you today, because this is our final episode of this first series of Resilience Rising, and I'm going to leave our listeners with my takeaway from the last 8 episodes. There is no silver bullet to solving poverty.
Yeah.
Poverty is a complex issue. We've just had 8 different conversations on 8 different facets of poverty reduction. We've talked to experts from across Simcoe Muskoka, and they've all brought different perspectives. They've all brought different ideologies. They've all brought different parts to the solution. And I think this ties in really well to this whole concept of collaboration, in that no one agency, no one project can do this. We do need to work together. We need to strive towards a better community for folks all across Simcoe County, all across the District of Muskoka. But no one agency is going to do that on their own. We talk often about a no wrong door approach for the people we serve. We need to start looking at that same way, expanding that to, I need to be able to feel comfortable to reach into Nikki's barn to pull something out, not without asking, but we need to really move towards a place where we are working collaboratively to have collective impact. Because if we don't, we will not move the needle. Mm-hmm. Right? We will see things continue to go down a pathway that we've been on for over a decade now, and our community deserves better. The people that we serve deserve better. And so, Rebecca and Nikki, I want to thank you so much for joining us on our final episode of Season 1 of Resilience Rising. I need to find my notes here as well. I also would like to thank our studio partners at Uplift Black Center for Social Justice and Inclusion. We recorded today's podcast at their Up Beatbox Creative Studio in downtown Barrie. And of course, I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in over these last 8 episodes. If you like this episode or any of the previous episodes, please subscribe or use social media to let others know about Resilience Rising, the podcast that shatters poverty myths, sparks optimism, and fuels innovative change through community-inspired discussion. You can share information about our podcast using the hashtag #ResilienceRising.
This episode is the season finale. Yay, well done. Thanks for being on the season finale. We thank you for your attention and would love your feedback as we consider our plans for Resilience Rising going forward. Did you miss an episode? All 8 are now available on our podcast page. I'm Amanda Fellows of CFS Counseling and Wellbeing with my co-host,
Brian Shelley from the United Way of Simcoe Muskoka.
And we're asking you to embrace innovative change to ensure our communities are great places to live for everyone. Thanks for tuning in.